So now that I have the initial setting figured out, it's time to create the first adventure for my players, the first actual quest. And to design a quest, I break it up into 3 simple bits: the story, the encounters, and challenges. So I begin by creating a basic story. It doesn't need to be anything super dramatic and big. Chances are you don't have an entire campaign story built for your campaign, especially if you don't have a whole lot of time before your first session. And that's completely fine. Not every quest has to tie in with the main storyline, and on top of that, maybe you don't really know what your players want to experience yet, and it's nice to figure that out before you start creating the BBEG and the main draw of the entire campaign. The really nice, easy way to start kind of thinking of a story is the actual monster manual itself. If you're not familiar with all of the creatures in the monster manual, then that's okay. You can look up PDFs of monsters sorted by their challenge rating and go from there. Find the challenge rating that suits your players and look at that list. Find something on that you're drawn to, that might fit your setting, or that you just think would be interesting. That's usually all the inspiration I need to build a quest line, whether it's my first or my last. And if that doesn't give you enough of an idea for an entire quest line, start looking at some of the locations that you've made in the setting that they're at. Rinkara has a market, so maybe one of the merchants is corrupt and is robbing from the town. Maybe Oswin, the cleric for the Temple of Damaris, is secretly evil and is trying to go through a ritual that will bring bad omens and kill the crops of the local village. So what I settled on was the Drowsy Tigress, the tavern in Rinkara. The basic storyline being that the tavern keep Midel has gone down to his cellar to clean out the area, and while moving a bunch of barrels, he found a mysterious burrows dug into the corner. Curious, he picks up a lantern and shines it down this burrow and finds 4 sets of eyes staring back at him. Once he sees these 4 eyes, this creature, whatever it may be, starts to actually chase him, and so he runs out of the cellar and locks it behind him. Now that we've created the main storyline that the players will be told, let's create a little bit of backstory for that, like why were the burrows there in the first place? So I created the half-orc Byron, the original owner of the Drowsy Tigress. A couple months ago, he claimed he was going to move east to go live in a city in the mountains, and he left the tavern to Midel. Although secretly, he's just been digging these burrows, and instead of actually moving eastward, had actually gone into the burrows themselves to continue digging them full time. While digging these tunnels, Byron unearthed the Death Dog Den, which let the creature out, slaying him in the process. But why was Byron digging the tunnels in the first place? The truth is that Byron was being haunted by some poltergeist or specter that was telling him to build these burrows and to continue to do so. And my inspiration from that came from the Winchester Mystery House, where this woman was compelled by these spirits and demons to keep building her house until she died. Again, this bleeds back into what I said in the previous video, which is if you find an idea, whether that's real or fake, you should take it if you like it. With that, I've created a story that has some mystery in it to maybe intrigue and entice my players. Although some of the time players are going to need more than just mystery to entice them into a quest, so let's give them a few rewards. If you remember from the last video, the Drowsy Tigress is actually on the rich side of Rinkara, so the players won't be able to immediately afford a room to stay. So when they go to the tavern, Midel will be able to tell that they are adventurers and problem solvers, and will ask them to help. And for helping him out with his problem, Midel will give the players a room to stay for the night, probably throw some silver their way, and heck, a free drink as well. With that, I have the story completely built. A hook at the beginning to entice the players, a boss for them to kill at the end, and a reward for doing so. So now let's move on to encounters. And to build the encounters, again, it takes 3 things: the setting, the creatures, and any loot. I wanted this to seem like sort of a mini dungeon. Nothing super expansive and large, but something that gives them that feel at the very beginning. So I figured with the few challenges that I will sprinkle in later, we really only need 2 combat encounters to flush this out. So I decided to put the first encounter in the cellar of the Drowsy Tigress. After it's been locked off, it's been infested by a few rats. This might seem like such a mundane task for my adventurers to do, but that's the point. Again, I really want the players to feel that power gain from level to level, and so setting the bar really low at the very beginning is a good way to do that. If they become level 20 and are fighting literal gods, this will be greatly juxtaposed by their first combat encounter, which was, kill some rats. Looking at the Swarm of Rats stat block, which was my original idea, I kind of figured that it might be a little bit too powerful for a first level party. Not that it couldn't be done, but I wanted to give my players lots of things to kill opposed to just a handful. So I went to the Giant Rat stat block and decided my players could probably take on 4 of them. As that stands, it's not a very difficult encounter, and it won't challenge my players very much. Which, before I continue, is fine. Not every encounter needs to be a live or die situation. So I decided to change it up a little bit and have one of the rats actually be hidden by the staircase that they entered in, and won't come out until the party has crossed unless they rolled a high enough perception check. This will make it so whoever's at the back of the party, which is usually the poor defenseless wizard, will be focused on the actual rat attacking him, opposed to using a splash spell to kill all of the rats immediately. On top of that, I'm going to have one of the rats come in an entire round later to add on to this intensity. The last thing is loot, and while rats don't have many things on them, there are things down in the cellar. So I created this list of possible loot, ending with this money pouch, which they could only find if they decide to investigate the area and roll DC 18 or higher. I set that DC pretty high, and the reason for that is I want gold to be very rare for low-level parties. Again, this is just another sense of growth and change from poor to rich. Also, it's not like I'm just going to ignore currency and not giving it to my players. They're going to get some for completing this quest and in the next encounter itself, so this one is optional and will make the players feel kind of unique if they find it. That being said, if they take it, they are stealing from the Drowsy Tigress and from Mytle, and so maybe that'll catch up to them later. And if I don't want to play with that dynamic, then Mytle could just forgive the party, or the fact that it was his never needs to be brought up. And for the next encounter, I followed the same 3 steps, except I changed a few small things to make this feel more like a finale. The first being the monsters there. I didn't want it to be just the Death Dog, so I created a few minions for him in this form of giant fire beetles. Action economy is central to D&D 5e, and so the more creatures there are, the more of a threat that is posed to the players. The Death Dog alone won't cause that much of a threat for the players and can't do that much damage, and the beetles definitely can't either, but since I've combined them, this will create a much more challenging fight for my players. So initially when they walk into the room, there will be 4 of these fire beetles, and I thought that was a good number, but with 1 hit, they'll go down in probably a round. So I decided to make these kind of like fleas on the Death Dog, and so every round at initiative 20, he summons 1d4 minus 1 more of these fire beetles. That will truly be the challenge to the players. The last thing I wanted to change about this encounter is very simple. They're in a burrow, so any blast attack that happens will actually make the tunnel that they entered from collapse in on itself. That's a little unfair to just spring on a party, and so what I'll have to do as a DM is describe how these tunnels, as they progress through them, have been more hastily dug out and don't look as sturdy. This will establish a more holistic environment, and also hint at the fact that if something concussive happens, there will be consequences. Last thing, add some loot, and bam, the encounters are built. The third and final step is definitely optional, but I like having them in my quests, and that is challenges. I reserve puzzles and riddles for full-fledged dungeons, and so I won't have any of those in this video, although I have built a few skill challenges for my players. Before creating any kind of challenges, you should learn what your party consists of and what your players are proficient in. Side note, I apologize, the neighbors are mowing their lawn. You probably hear that a little bit in the background. So I made up a party real quick, and I gave them all a few proficiencies and things that they would be generally good at. And the best tip of advice I could ever make for challenges is make them specifically for your players. I like to do this with entire quest lines. Build an entire quest that's centered around one of your players, so when they leave, they think, wow, I don't think we really could have done that unless we had the wizard in our party. But for the first few sessions, the players are still figuring out their proficiencies and their abilities, and so it's better to create a wide variety of skill challenges so they'll figure that one out when they're doing them. So I made 4 brief challenges for my players. Nothing that would take more than 10 minutes, but things that would give the players kind of insight into what they're better at doing. The first being a 30-foot tall climbing wall that my players will encounter. I did set an athletics check of DC 15 to climb up the entirety of this wall, but there are other ways the party might be able to do it, like the spell Spider Climber. The reason for DC 15, which is fairly high, is because there's a barbarian in my party, one that has spec'd into athletics. Chances are that player won't have to roll any more than a 10 to succeed on that DC. However, the other players will require a luckier roll, and the barbarian can absolutely assist anyone else trying to climb up this wall by boosting them at the bottom or pulling them up from the top. Regardless of how they do it, this will give that player and that character a moment to shine. The next thing is Byron's journal, the one they found in the last combat encounter. This will reveal to the party the backstory of why Byron was digging this tunnel and the specter that haunted him. However, this journal is coded and will take a DC 13 intelligence check to decode. Again, this DC is geared toward my wizard, who probably won't have to roll any more than a 10 to succeed on that check. And if they fail to decode it, or don't even try, they can maybe find an NPC to help them deal with that, which will take the more charismatic abilities that the bard would have, giving that character a moment to shine. The next one is essentially traps that the rogue can check for. Like I said before, this tunnel is kind of falling apart, and so there will be sections that if the players step on it, will collapse underneath them, causing them to take 1d6 damage if they fail a dexterity saving throw. However, the rogue, with the kind of duty of checking for traps, will be able to discover this before people step on it, and will give that character a moment to shine. The last challenge is a 30-foot section of the tunnel that's already collapsed and has a wooden plank placed above it that the players are able to cross on. Obviously, this board isn't the most sturdy and it kind of rocks back and forth, so it'll take an acrobatics check to get across. 3 out of 4 of my players are actually proficient in acrobatics, and so this actually targets the wizard in the reverse manner. Instead of that character being unordinarily good at something, they're unordinarily bad at something, which will make the other players have to compensate to help that character. So after they complete those encounters and a few of those challenges, they'll go back up to Midle, get the reward, and that's the end of the session. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and gained some insight and some inspiration in quest building. So I will see you guys in the next one, and remember, even in a time of crisis, adventure is out there, me boys.